So as we continue this conversation around the decolonization of various university institutions and also the decolonial thought, let's quickly take you to a clip where the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, was also speaking at the farewell ceremony of Professor Mandla. And just take a listen to what he had to say about Pan-Africanism when it comes to tertiary institutions.
I dream of truly decolonized, democratized, and decentralized African universities that are autonomous yet accountable, committed to the pursuit of intellectual excellence, yet rooted in their communities, effectively managed internally, yet working closely with other stakeholders. Universities that are Africanized in their staffing, in their values, in their pedagogy, in their epistemologies and instructional languages, and yet are capable of competing globally, contributing to the global pool of knowledge, and responding quickly and effectively to global changes and emerging local needs. Universities that attract students and faculty from across the continent and the diasporas. I think that's an important definition of what UNISA is and what UNISA ought to be.
And Professor LenkaBula, is it a question of leaving that descriptor that the former president just used now to only UNISA, or is it something that should apply across all universities that find themselves on the continent? And I asked this question just quickly on the Vice-Chancellor of UCT when she was doing an interview, the interview for the position, and she said that one thing that is important is that students who move into UCT must feel that this is an African institution, not that they feel that they've moved into an institution that at its core is perceived to be very Eurocentric.
I think all universities in Africa must demonstrate that they are African universities, not because of their geographic location, but because of the epistemologies, which is the idea of knowledge, but also the essence and the fundamental structuring of how they organize themselves and they are engaged institutions. This is quite important because the evolution of universities is not something that we only draw from other geographic locations. The first university, we've been told, started in Fez and was started in Fez, Morocco by Africans. We have also histories of Timbuktu. We have commitments or knowledge recorded. For instance, Saint Thomas or Augustine of Hippo, who were quite integral to even the religious systems. So I'm of the view that we need to understand the histories and histories of knowledge in Africa in order to demonstrate African universities. However, we did not be village universities that only know about themselves and not necessarily understand the contributions of Africa's intellectuals, Africa's knowledge systems, and Africa's civilizations to the global knowledge arena. We can't talk about the Pythagoras rule in mathematics without remembering the Sudan belt, the Egyptian belt, but also including some of the Ethiopian codification of mathematical concepts, whether you talk about the pyramids or something. So I think even the idea that there are those, for instance, such as D'Souza, who argue against the notion of Pan-Africanism. And it's very important to understand that the idea of Pan-Africanism is not about only relationality. It's about abstract concepts, it's about philosophy, it's about mathematics, technologies, and sciences. It's also around that idea that Du Bois, Sobukwe, Mamdani, Amina Mama, and many other feminists, whether you talk about the literary scholar Misere Mugo, or whether you talk about the forestry and natural scientist Wangari Maathai, are quite entwined with the global knowledge arena. And that's quite important for us to reassess, because often the argument that is posited against decolonial or anti-colonial Pan-African knowledge systems is that, no, how can it do, is it able to do technology or physics or those aspects, when in actual fact, they are the grounding of some of these evolutions we see in chemistry, in physics, in biology, including their manifestations in nanotechnologies.
You make reference to De Souza. I'm not too sure whether we're speaking about Bonaventura De Souza Santos. Is that the guy? Is it the same person? Not the same person. Okay.
No, Bonaventura is in solidarity
okay.
and a partner to the notion of decolonial and emancipated knowledge systems. The De Souza I refer to is the American of Indian descent scholar who says African Americans live with poverty because their makeup, their intellectual and rationality is not comparable to a fully fledged human being. Hence, they will always be at the bottom of the stratification. And these are similar to what eugenics, which is the scientists, when they were studying neurology or brains, tended to saying Africans have small brains and therefore had to be oppressed. So these are arguments that we have to know, we have to analyze, but in reasserting our dignity, we do not just say in advocacy terms, but we can chat back intellectually with research and with definite research-led arguments.
As we're speaking now about De Souza, this is now speaking about Bonaventura. One of the arguments that he also made in one of the lectures that I've attended, he speaks about what he finds in academic spaces, particularly on the continent as well, is African studies would be seen as the alternative. For instance, the indigenous knowledge systems is perceived as the alternative. And he's arguing that actually that is the primary. And if we were to move that to argue and say that indigenous knowledge systems is actually the primary, how do we get to that space when the argument against that is to say that people are arguing and saying that no, now you want to strip nations of civilization?
To a large extent, the argument that focusing on endogenous knowledge systems would be stripping the global footprint is actually a fallacy. When the germination of idea occurs, to some extent is entwined with languages. When you invent, as an inventor, you have first the cognitive idea of positing some reflexive thought, and then you develop it and you compare and contrast with other inventions that are available. And Odora Hoppers, the Ugandan scholar who actually stayed and taught in South Africa, who's a leading scholar on indigenous and endogenous knowledge systems, states that to have the best of endogenous systems or endogenous and indigenous knowledge systems is to appreciate the knowledge that we produce, but also not limited to the context within which it's produced, but to ensuring that it dialogues with other knowledge systems in order that it flourishes.
Sure.
And therefore, I'm of the view that you cannot also run and pretend to be Confucian when you are truly L'Afrique and know Africa's rhythms, mathematics, and others. You must have a base to engage with Confucian knowledge systems from the East. You must be grounded in order you deal with the Persian knowledge systems or European knowledge systems.
Prof, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I have to ask you this question, and that is just a quick response to you, from you rather. The NDP saying that by 2030, 75% of the staff should have PhDs. African and women must make up 50% of research and teaching staff. In terms of policy, from government's perspective, how do we respond to making sure that we achieve these goals?
We must invest in South African scholars and ensure that they pursue their PhD, and we must not be afraid to encouraging those who have honors to pursue their masters and those with their masters to pursue their PhDs. And these ideas are not titles. When you do a PhD, you're creating knowledge. In the global arena or knowledge economy, you cannot expect to lead a country that is competitive, that participates in the global systems without the requisite knowledge makers. And when we encourage students, staff, to ensure that they pursue this, is to ensure that we're not dependent, we're not buying everything, including how to clean water from other ideas, when we can produce them here. So I'm excited that you have referred to the NDP, and in my own university, the investment that I have already begun as the new Vice-Chancellor is to first encouraging my staff to pursuing their PhD, secondly, to ensuring that the Vice-Chancellors and Principals' bursary is towards the postgraduate development, and thirdly, to ensuring that we develop 10 niche areas that are contextually relevant, but which can propel us in the global arena. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Prof. We could go on and on academic conversations. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we get to have another opportunity to have this conversation with you. That is Professor Puleng LenkaBula, who is the Vice-Chancellor of the University of South Africa, UNISA. We go to a quick ad break.